I often make the joke that every time I read Atlas Shrugged, and I haven't read it that many times, but every time I read it, that the place in the book that feels really like, oh, this is really prescient, this is something that's happening today, is somewhere later in the book. I haven't read it in a while, but something happened recently which made me think, oh, we're in that part of the book now.
Fred Meyer's corporate PR machine wants us to look at their decision to close these stores and to take their excuses at face value. They want us to think it's about crime and poverty and what they like to call regulatory burdens, which means high wages and strong labor standards. But don't fall for it. This closure is about just one thing: corporate greed. Sure, the grocery business can be tough, but the Kroger Corporation is thriving. They're the second biggest grocery chain in the country. They reported an operating profit of $1.3 billion just last quarter. And while they're making the choice to walk away from communities that have supported them for decades, they paid their CEO more than $15 million last year. That's 457 times what they pay their median employee. With these closures, fresh, affordable produce is becoming much harder to reach, especially in working-class neighborhoods where good options are growing thin. On top of all this, Trump's cuts to SNAP benefits threaten to strip food assistance from thousands of families right here in Seattle. Money that's spent at local grocery stores like this one, keeping families healthy and supporting good jobs at the same time. We desperately need creative, effective local leadership to take on these challenges. That is why I am thrilled to accept UFCW's sole endorsement for Seattle Mayor, and I am proud to support UFCW 3000's Fresh Food for All campaign. Access to affordable, healthy food is a basic right. We cannot allow giant grocery chains to stomp all over our communities, close stores at will, and leave behind food deserts.
Now, I certainly, as a Rothbardian or near Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist, I have some problems with Rand, and maybe we'll talk about those in another video, but her ability to kind of predict how the socialist downfall of the U.S. would happen is actually pretty good. I mean, I mentioned this a couple videos ago, but we have in New York a guy promising rent control, state-run grocery stores, and free buses. You can find them at the corner of Tragedy and Commons, without any consideration of the consequences of these actions. And in Seattle, we actually have a new mayor saying that she won't allow grocery stores to close, as if that actually addresses the problem in any meaningful way. It's funny, and a little sad, how the simplest second-order consequences of a policy escape these people, if in fact that's what's happening. And these people are supposed to be our leaders? Well, if you say so. Okay, scenario. You have a climate-controlled vehicle, and a vehicle that doesn't just go from point A, get on, to point B, get off, but circles around the city for hours and hours and hours each day. What happens when you let people on for free indefinitely? Well, those seats are going to fill up with people who have nothing better to do and love to make things around them worse. Who's going to stop them? The bus driver? No, he's going to sit in his plate glass, enclosure and drive the bus. Police? In a sane world, yeah, that's what would happen. They would get on and they would say, hey, you got on and you went around in a circle the whole way, you're going to get off at the next stop. But no, these socialist types believe that the police shouldn't harass the destitute, because they're so unfortunate, even when the destitution is their own making. Kropotkin, for instance, said that once everyone had bread, once everyone was guaranteed bread, they wouldn't commit crimes anymore. Of course, the simple falseness of this belief hasn't stopped modern socialists from pretending it's true and, having everybody else suffer the consequences. And therefore, what's the final result? Well, you get the buses filled with homeless people and junkies, and it becomes unavailable for productive people to use. That means that the productive people now need to move toward personal vehicles or ride-sharing or carpools, which inevitably increases traffic, not decreases it. Exactly the opposite result from what the socialist claimed that he wanted. And then the socialist doubles down, maybe puts a special tax on private cars, a special tax on gasoline, special requirements to license the car to travel, within the city, and creates another problem somewhere else. You get this tangled web of problems where you solve one problem, create two more, solve those two, create four more, and so on. It's also worth noting that dysfunctional and filthy buses provide a great justification to add more funding for cleanup, which gets more people doing busy work instead of actually doing something productive. This is one of the major problems with government organizations is that when they fail, they get more funding. And when they succeed, they also get more funding. And when everything's normal, they get more funding. But let's spend a little more time on the grocery stores idea. This is in New York and in Seattle at this point. What about keeping them open? Well, I mean, we haven't gotten to the point yet where the Seattle mayor or even the New York City mayor can actually enslave people and force them to work there. So what are they? Well, I mean, I hope. But like, what this means in practice is that they're going to expropriate those stores from the owners and then attempt them to run as state services at a loss, of course. Well, what does that mean? Where does that get us? Well, that gets us waste. We get wasted food being sold below cost. We get more government employees wasting tax dollars. We get suboptimal uses of building spaces because tax-funded organizations are not subject to the incentives to reduce losses, only to improve their funding. Such is the effect of most government action. Resources are used in ways that sane people wouldn't use voluntarily for the purposes of encouraging more waste rather than better productivity. Gradual reduction of the pie for the economy is what we see in the long run, right? The pie should be growing, but in fact it's shrinking. The small surpluses that people create to get by and maybe improve their lot get turned into massive deficits by taxation, but it happens so gradually that people often don't see the source of the problem and ask for more problem rather than actual solutions. Ask yourself this. If food is available at below-cost rates at these state-run grocery stores, how will they prevent real grocery store owners from simply buying out the shelves and putting those foods on their own shelves? Well, number one, they might have much lower quality food, but more likely what they'll actually have is rationing, 1 unit per customer kind of stuff. But in the typical tyrannical or anarcho-tyrannical kind of fashion, this will only be enforced against certain people, probably denoted by their willingness to smash and grab stuff, and whether or not they have anything to lose by doing so. And that's the best case scenario. More realistically, these state grocery stores will gradually consume more and more resources, be poorly maintained, and gradually reduce the value of themselves as real estate and the value of their neighbors' real estate as well, due to the clientele they attract. More local grocery stores that are privately owned will give up and abandon the area. How can they compete with something that can sell everything below cost? Some fraction of their customers will decide that they will tolerate the state stores, at least at first, and they'll jump ship, either for monetary or ideological reasons, which is a big deal in New York and Seattle. This will, of course, accelerate the problem. Remember that tax money doesn't simply teleport from taxpayers to the state-run stores either, right? That's the lossless example. But what really happens is that you'll also have to build up, in addition to the state-run grocery store employees, a class of bureaucrats that move the tax money from taxes into the state-run stores. This will take even more workers out of productive jobs and waste even more wealth on paper pushing, effectively. These bureaucrats will not be incentivized to do their jobs efficiently or well. Why would they? And failures will lead to demands for more funding in the same way that contrived successes, even if they're partial successes, might. Wasted food will reduce overall supply and push up market prices, at least locally, even in the private sector. If the prices of food in state-run stores are set, say they're set to like 90% of the market price, with the remaining 10% of the cost dealt with by tax money, subsidized by tax money, those prices will also end up rising because they're basically draining real wealth out of the private sector, making prices rise. That will lead to further deterioration of the situation. The need for more tax money to pay this growing network of state stores will discourage businesses and productive people from staying in or entering the jurisdiction if they can avoid it. Before long, the money the state stores will get will end up coming from the very people that they were intended to help in the first place. But many of these people will not see the connection between their high taxes and the below market prices they pay for food. They'll see it as a win and ask for more of this. That's, of course, if the system doesn't collapse on itself first. These various second-order effects will all happen to greater or lesser degrees depending on the circumstances. But the point is that politicians stand up and talk about these things and claim that they'll be cheaper or free, and then average people will often accept that as if there aren't any trade-offs or second-order effects. It's because, one group doesn't want to talk about the effects and the other group doesn't want to hear about the effects that neither of them acknowledges them, but they're still there. Those negative effects will continue to build and they will continue to harm the poor while lining the pockets of politicians and bureaucrats at their expense. And that's the real tragedy, honestly. Before long, we'll end up at a later part in Ayn Rand's book. Anyway, that's what I got for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.